Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Roundup on bet.nola.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Spencer, the Guru, Urquhart, and we are here for Week 14. It's weird because with 18 weeks, you think Week 14 is real late, and then you realize there's still 5 weeks left in the season, Spencer. But for fantasy purposes, it is getting late because this is the last week of the regular season in most leagues. So it's a big week coming up.
Right, most definitely. Yeah, most leagues don't do week 18. So this is the last. We're in the final month, the final stretch. Only 4 weeks to go. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how this all shakes out. And we're gonna have to get in all these injuries and updates and such because it gets crazier every week as the year goes on. More and more stuff happens. So for those that survived to this point, congratulations, and we'll keep this run going hopefully.
Yeah, and I think as we go forward in this show, one theme you're going to notice is it really does become a week-to-week survive and advance. That means you may be picking up a new defense every week. It means you may be streaming a different RB2 every week. You're going to have to play matchups even more so than usual, because you don't have to worry about rest of season so much. If a guy's not producing, cut bait. You're not going to get through this week if you don't, if he's not producing. Now, if you have a playoff spot clinched, obviously you can get through this week. But once the playoffs start, which is week 15 in most leagues, that's not the case anymore. So we will get to all of that. We'll get to some waiver wire pickups if you are looking to do some streaming. We're going to talk about our fantasy stars of the week that was. We'll do some DFS and some week 14 sleepers. First, I want to remind you, our sponsor is Caesar Sportsbook, and you can sign up for the Caesar Sportsbook app by going to NOLA.com/Caesars. That will automatically get you the special promo code of NOLA1, and that's worth $100 to you. And so it is worth doing it. NOLA.com/Caesars. You can do it right now. You can do it after the show. You can do it anytime before mobile betting goes live. And you don't have to deposit money right now if you don't want to. But as long as you do it before mobile betting goes live, you will get that $100 bonus bet. So NOLA.com/Caesars is the address for that. Let's get rolling here on the Fantasy Roundup. As we always do, we're going to start by looking back at the week that was, week 13, starting with the top scoring quarterbacks. Pretty much the usual suspects here, Spencer: Kyler Murray, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford. Zach Wilson, the surprise. The Jets were in catch-up mode most of the game. He was able to get some yards and touchdowns there in the second half. But other than that, pretty boilerplate here.
Right, yeah. Good to see Kyler back. He had been out for about a month, I believe. He missed 3 weeks in the bye week. So, yeah, it was great to see him back. He was a much-needed boost for a lot of people. Unfortunately, the one league I have him in, I fell out of contention because I had him and bunch of other injuries happened, so that league was a little too late. But for those that were able to weather that storm while he was out, then your team's probably looking really good right now because with him back, you got an elite QB1. And then, Zach Wilson, a big surprise, getting into the top 5. He's he might be somebody worth keeping an eye on for streaming purposes. He's at least – seems like the Jets, they're at least making progress, unlike the Jags and some of these all Texans. Some of these bad teams are just stuck in a rut. At least the Jets are showing some signs of moving the ball.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with Wilson back, and they want to get him that experience as a rookie, and we'll see. They may keep throwing. They got the Saints this week. Not the easiest defense in the world to move the ball against, but the way the Saints games have worked, as we all know lately, is that defense tends to get worn down, and they can be susceptible to the big play late in the game. So we'll see what happens. Speaking about quarterbacks, it's been a little bit of a rough year if you have one of the top guys. There's been very few you can rely on them week in and week out type guys, and Kyler Murray is one of them when he's been healthy. But as you said, he missed 3 games with injury. Tom Brady's been another one. But everybody else, Stafford, Herbert, Josh Allen, a lot of these guys have had good weeks, and then they've had weeks where they've just sort of been middle of the pack. It's really, we say in fantasy, hey, quarterbacks, it's very difficult to get any separation. But this year, if you've had a Kyler Murray or a Tom Brady, you've been in pretty good shape most weeks.
Yeah, because also, Lamar Jackson's been hit or miss. Patrick Mahomes has been hit or miss, and Dak Prescott. Yeah, there hadn't really been any true consistency there. I mean, yeah, Brady's been pretty consistent. So there have been a few guys, but for the most part, it's been kind of tough. I mean, if you have, I'd probably say like a top 8 QB, it's probably just worth riding it out and hoping that their bad weeks don't end up too bad. But outside of that, it's kind of like might as well just stream, especially in single quarterback leagues. I'm in several leagues where I've just been streaming. It's like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, shoot, even Taylor Heineke some weeks. Taysom Hill is like deep dive streaming options just because it's just I don't like usually spending high picks on a QB. I mean, I've got several leagues with Herbert, and I'm doing pretty well in those. But the ones where I'm streaming, I'm staying afloat. I mean, it's not the don't be scared to do that if you need to. Don't reach for don't force. Don't feel obligated that you have to have the same quarterback every week.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk more about Taysom Hill. He was number 6 on that list, by the way, right behind Zach Wilson. I don't think that's a deep dive. I think Taysom Hill, now we'll see about the finger. We'll see if the Saints are going to start him. But just because of the floor he's got rushing the ball, I mean, the guy's going to rush for 50-plus yards every week. I think he's a viable starting quarterback in a one-quarterback league right now. I mean, again, unless you have one of the stars, unless you have Murray or Brady or, we'll throw Mahomes, maybe Herbert, Dak Prescott in that category where you're probably not going to bench those guys. Lamar Jackson, you're probably not going to bench him. But if Josh Allen. But if you don't have one of those, say, 6 guys, you're probably playing Taysom Hill over just about anybody else at this point, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just worried about the finger because I'm pretty sure all 4 of the picks came after he hurt his finger on Thursday night. Prior to that, it happened pretty early in the game, and a really gutsy effort on his part, especially with the running, because he couldn't really throw much. But when he did throw, man, it was ugly. I mean, he's already not a great passer, but with the jacked up finger, it got really bad there for a while.
It did, and the Saints were chasing the game late, and when Hill has to throw, he's really going to be in a spot because that's not his style, right? But I mean, if you can rely on 50 yards rushing plus and maybe a rushing touchdown every other week or so, that's a pretty good base to be working from as a quarterback. And again, if you don't have one of those top 6 guys, I don't mind streaming him at all, as long as he's starting. And we have to watch the injury reports starting tomorrow. Is he going to be able to play through what's reportedly a torn tendon in his finger? So that is the big question mark there. Let's move on to running backs. The big star in this conversation was Javonte Williams on Sunday Night Football. I happened to be heard on some radio show, and I can't remember what show it was now. It was a national show where somebody called in and said they lost by 0.2 points to a guy who had Javonte Williams, and then going through he had like a 35-yard catch on the last play of the first half that didn't mean anything to the game, but it was worth 4.5 fantasy points. And then he also had a couple of garbage time catches at the end of the second half, and all of a sudden you look up and the guy's got 30 points. I mean, he was really productive, and I think a lot of people penciled him in as a guy who could have been with Melvin Gordon out. And we'll talk more about him in a minute, Spencer, but he lived up to the billing and then some.
Right. Yeah, he really did. He showed that he could handle a workhorse role. And his rookie season is kind of reminded me of Jonathan Taylor's rookie year last year. It started off kind of slow, didn't do a whole lot, showed flashes, but never really was trusted with the full workload. But in the second half, he's looking like he's getting more go. And with Melvin Gordon banged up and Broncos falling out of contention, him being a veteran, they probably won't. There won't be any need to push him down the stretch. If anything, they'll want to see what they've got with Javonte, see if he's a true primary back, which it looks like he is. So I would think we'll see more of Javonte, and he's somebody that it would have been a good person to trade for. I'm glad I got him in some leagues because I think he's going to have a big second half.
Yeah, I had Gordon in one league and was desperately trying to get Javonte Williams early in the year, and the owner just wouldn't do it. For good reason, obviously, now looking back on it. And I ended up trading Gordon anyway. And actually in that league, I have David Montgomery, who was – that Bears-Cardinals game was crazy. You didn't think it was going to be a big fantasy game with Murray just coming back from injury and there expected to be some bad weather. But, I mean, Murray and Montgomery both had big games in that game. And then the other one I'll point out was Josh Jacobs, Spencer. I mean, Josh Jacobs the Raiders were a pass-first team the first half of the season. They're starting to run the ball a lot more now.
Yeah, and Monty, a true workhorse there. Then Jacobs caught some passes this week. He's and with Kenyon Drake out here, that really boosts his stock. He'll probably be their true every down back. So yeah, even though the team's not too good, the offense kind of goes through him. So yeah, and then the Fournette, another top 5 performance by Leonard Fournette. He's really solidifying himself as an RB1.
Then for Week 13's top scoring wide receivers, we'll go to that list. And it's been kind of hard to find consistent receivers. The guy who's number 5 on that list, Cooper Kupp, has been the consistent receiver. Davante Adams was on bye. But you see some guys here who have popped off for some big weeks, and then for some not so big weeks. Justin Jefferson, a huge week. Diontae Johnson's had some big weeks just because he gets so much volume. Speaking of volume, Godwin, 30.2 points without a touchdown. He had 15 catches for 152 yards. And then T. Higgins of the Bengals, that's second straight week for him with a big week, where Jamar Chase getting a lot of attention from opposing secondaries, and T. Higgins has taken advantage.
Right. Yeah, this has been tough for Chase owners down the stretch. Myself included. I was riding the Chase wave, and now it's kind of fizzling out here with him getting the number 1 corners. And I tell you what, that's just how they do it. They take what the defense gives them. Joe Burrow wise beyond his years, and it's really helping Higgins out. But I think that could correct itself some. I think teams now are like, well, shoot, Higgins is good. We got to respect him. We can't really double anybody. So now I think that's going to help Chase. I think Chase will have a nice finish as long as he can hold on to the football, because he's so talented. And with Higgins opposite of him, you can't just focus all your attention on him, or else Higgins is going to burn you.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Chase's drops. My gosh, he had at least like a 50-yard catch and quite possibly a 70-yard touchdown that he turned into an interception. Like, you got to be especially upset if you're a Joe Burrow owner there too. Like, man, I just lost a point when I should have had, 7 on that play. And so the drops are it's just one of those things. I think he had it a little bit at LSU too. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive to say it. He is a great receiver in every sense except for drops, where he gets himself open. He's got elite speed. He understands he's an elite route runner, and he's going to make big plays. But every now and then he'll do everything right and then drop the football. And so it's just something you kind of have to deal with him.
Yeah.
You're watching the fantasy roundup. I'm sorry, Spencer, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying that's something that the Diontae Johnson, who was on this list, is dealing with. Last year, he dealt with a lot of drops, but this year he looks like he hadn't had that problem. He's really emerged. He's a guy that I would love to have here for down the stretch. He's a WR1 moving forward, I'd say.
Yeah, he gets so many targets from Big Ben in that offense. Hey, you're watching the Fantasy Roundup on bet.NOLA.com. If you've got your fantasy question or comment, feel free to leave it in the comments. Give us a like or a subscribe there on Facebook or YouTube. And let's keep this train rolling. We'll move on to top scoring tight ends for Week 13. And listen, early in the year, last year he's hurt a lot. Early in the year, he had some injuries, some ineffectiveness. George Kittle is back. This is 2 or 3 big weeks he's had now in the last couple of months. And I thought Dallas Goedert was going to be tight end 1, early in the day, caught a couple of touchdown passes for the Eagles. But George Kittle, man, whew.
Yeah, the animal, man. He's just a guy that can do it all. Debo out really took advantage of the target hog rule there for the Niners. And another big week for Gronk, too. These guys as long as they're healthy, man, Kittle and Gronk, they're great talents. They get in. They're so injury prone, but man, they're both healthy now, and then they're killing it, man. It's good to see these tight ends when they're healthy, because it's a brutal position. I mean, dudes get injured a lot there. That's why it's amazing. The guys like Kelsey and Hawkinson, guys like that, they play almost every game, and they're bulldogs. They're not trying to knock Kittle or Gronk or Waller, because it is a brutal position, but it's nice to see them out there and producing, because when all the good tight ends are producing, it's not as much of a wasteland as it normally is because they do have a lot of elite talents at this position.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about injuries. Darren Waller out now for the Raiders. Logan Thomas at the bottom of that list was off to a good start. Then he suffers a knee injury. He's out for the Washington football team. And he had just gotten back from a concussion a couple of weeks ago, so he was starting to look productive again. And that's what's the hard part about the tight end is it's finding somebody who can stay healthy and somebody who can stay consistent. And if you don't have Kelsey or Kittle or Waller, and even as you mentioned, those guys have injury problems, it can be difficult to find. And so that's another position where unless you have one of those stars, you may be looking to stream throughout the playoffs.
Right. It's a lot of times they'll have streamers out there, guys like Tyler Conklin, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, possibly. I get to some of those with our waiver wire DFS stuff. Yeah, they have guys out there. It's a little better than last year. I'll say that. Last year was especially a wasteland at tight end.
I had a team last year where I had Kelsey, and I think I finished third in the league. And quite frankly, the rest of my team wasn't very good. But because I had such a big advantage at tight end, I was able to win some weeks just because of that. And then you stream a couple other positions, a little bit of luck, and all of a sudden you're deep into the playoffs. And it makes a big difference if you can have an advantage at that position. And so keep an eye out for that. And that's a little bit of a tease to our fantasy stars. But you go first, Spencer. Your fantasy star for week 13.
All right, yeah, I'll go with Javonte Williams here. I had him in multiple leagues, and of course, has 178 yards from scrimmage. Whew, yeah, that's a lot, man. He could have had even more if he had more than just one touchdown. If the offense, man, that offense is not good in Denver. If he was on a better offense, he'd really be scary, like the way Jonathan Taylor is. But even with that, he was still the top fantasy back for this week. Has a bright future. Would love to have him in dynasty formats because he's somebody that's going to be good for the next few weeks as well as probably the next few years. He's a special talent.
Yeah, he really is. And he's, I agree with you. If you have him in dynasty, you are in really, really good shape. The Broncos had about 400 yards of offense. He had almost half. So when they were moving the ball, it was very often it was Javonte Williams, even in a game in which they trailed almost from start to finish. So it wasn't like they were funneling the ball to him on purpose, but he was just the one who was able to move the ball. My fantasy star for week 13 is George Kittle. And you see those numbers. I mean, he actually had one carry. I went ahead and put that on there. Hey, it's worth half a point. But this type of score, 9 catches, 181 yards, a couple touchdowns, 39.6 points, is very rare for a tight end. The only other tight end who's even come close to it this year. Here's a little trivia question for you, Spencer. Can you guess the only other tight end to put up even more than 30 points? As you saw there, I went only one tight end has even had more than 30 points in a game this year, and he actually had over 40. Do you remember who that was?
Over 40. Oh man,
over 40 points. If anybody wants to chime in on a comment, see if they can come up with this too. I'll leave that hanging for just a few minutes. We go through waiver wire targets, but George Kittle. Listen, that was. I'll come back to you, Spencer. But that was a performance that you don't see very often from a tight end. Put it that way, 39.6 points. Let's do our waiver wire targets. Then we'll get to the answer of that trivia question. Your week 14 targets. Listen, again, at this point in the season, you're not looking for long-term solutions here. You want people who this week can help you get that win to get you into the playoffs, and then, or if your playoffs already started, to get you that win in the playoffs. All that matters is the next week at this point in the season. And having said that, it is worth occasionally looking at guys who are on bye this week. If you're already in the playoffs, you can pick them up for the playoffs next week. So that would be Colts and Dolphins and Patriots, I believe, this week.
And the Eagles.
And the Eagles, yeah. So those 4 teams, like a Kenneth Gainwell, it looks like Miles Sanders will be back next week for the Eagles. But if you're looking for somebody, a speculative ad on Kenneth Gainwell wouldn't be the worst idea. But talk about your choices here.
Yeah, my running back choice, I know, is a name that's very frustrating to a lot of fantasy players out there, Rashaad Penny. The reason I put him, though, is because in what's an ugly Seattle backfield, he looks like the most effective back there. I know it's not saying much, but, come on. He's got to be better than Adrian Peterson. I can't believe they're going to go with Peterson for another week. I guess you never know with Pete Carroll. He's so stubborn. But I would think if he has common sense, he would while Penny's healthy, Fear's finally healthy. You know, use him while he's healthy. I mean, he's a guy that's always hurt, but he's looks healthy finally. So I would say and it's a good matchup against the Texans. So he's somebody, if you're in a deeper league and have a lot of running back trouble, he's worth a look there, I'd say. And then a couple of receivers after him that I really like both of these, Russell Gage and KJ Osborne. I feel like if you need a receiver for this week, well, you're in luck because both of these, I think, are not only temporary solutions, but could be long-term solutions for like flex value purposes, because Russell Gage is really taking over as the target hog there in Atlanta, and KJ Osborne with Adam Thielen out should see a big role there in Minnesota, since it's a very narrow target tree. It's usually just Jefferson, Thielen, and a little bit of Conklin, and that's it. So I'm guessing now it'll be Jefferson, Osborne, and maybe a little more Conklin. But anyway, I still think it'll be enough for Osborne to be a good play a lot of weeks.
Yeah, and between Jefferson and Thielen, it's hard for a defense to pick one. Defenses are going to pick Justin Jefferson now. So KJ Osborne may have that opportunity. I like that pick a lot. My waiver wire targets for week 14, this one's a little bit, it's a name from way down there, JaMychal Hasty of the 49ers, but he may be the only healthy running back for the 49ers this week. And you're talking about a team that likes to run the ball. Cincinnati could be a bad weather game, a team that is susceptible to giving up rushing yards. JaMychal Hasty, Jeff Wilson's out, Elijah Mitchell's in concussion protocol, Trey Sermon's on IR. Look, somebody's going to get the carries there. Somebody's going to get those screen passes from Jimmy G. And JaMychal Hasty, again, this may be more of a streaming solution. It's possible it's a 2-week solution, but I do like him a lot. We talk about streaming tight ends. Logan Thomas out. Ricky Seals-Jones has also been hurt, but most reports make it look like he will be back this week. Check out those injury reports. But, he was pretty effective when he was in there the first time Logan Thomas was out. And then another streaming, look, defenses are the place to stream. If your league plays defenses, the Packers, they've got the Bears this week. Then they've got I'm gonna have to look up their schedule now. I had it in front of me, but their schedule is very, very effective for defenses. They play the Ravens next week, and the Ravens have not been very good offensively the last few weeks. So I don't mind that matchup either. And then on Christmas Day, they play the Browns, who have not been very effective. And so then championship week, January 2nd, they play the Vikings. Maybe you want to go ahead and stream somebody else. But these next 3 matchups are pretty tasty for the Packers.
Yeah, they've been a solid defense this year. I know everyone gives all the credit to Aaron Rodgers, which, I mean, he is still an elite QB, but their defense has actually been a little better than usual this year. Normally they're like a middle of the pack defense, but they've been pretty solid. They've been, I'd say, definitely an above average stop unit. So yeah, they get a good matchup like this week against the Bears and some of those ones they'll have down the stretch. I could see picking them up for sure.
I mean, it's going to be a lot of bad weather games. They're at home against the Bears and Browns and Vikings, and then they're in Baltimore. So you're looking at, we saw what bad weather can do to offenses last night in that Monday night game. I mean, I like a lot about what the Packers bring to the table. I'm surprised they're available in more than 70% of leagues. So if you're looking for a defense or you're somebody who streams defenses, that might be the one to go after. The Saints are another option too, by the way. They play the Jets this week. They do have the Bucs next week. But then it gets easier again, I believe, Panthers and Dolphins. So, a chance to maybe, and then the Falcons. And so maybe a chance to get some fantasy points going there too.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, they wouldn't start them against the Bucs. I can tell you that.
No, I wouldn't start them against the Bucs. But if you could hold them on your bench for the 2 weeks after that, it could go back to being pretty productive. So, again, not everybody has the bench spot, but if you're in a position where you can hold somebody, look at those defensive matchups. That it's not a huge advantage, but in the playoffs, you're going to look for every advantage you can get. Try to get those extra points. All right, back to my trivia question, Spencer. The top scoring tight end game this year, the only one over 30 points until George Kittle did it on Sunday.
I think it was Mark Andrews.
Ding, 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 ding. You got it. It's Mark Andrews on the Monday night game against the Colts, where this is just like the dream fantasy game. 11 catches, 147 yards. Great. Then he also found the end zone twice, and he caught 2 2-point conversions. It doesn't get any better than that. But Mark Andrews is the answer. He had 41.7 points that night That was on October the 12th, it looks like. October the 12th. So he was number 1, but George Kittle number 2 this week. So it's just a little bit of trivia there.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Gronk, but then I was like, I don't think Gronk ever had a week that big. And then I looked down I didn't cheat. I looked at the list of teams on my little pocket schedule. I was like, oh, yeah, Mark Andrews.
No.
I was like, Baltimore.
Mark Andrews, he's had a couple of big weeks, actually. Gronk had a big week 1. I think he was pretty close to 30. But the only 2 have gotten to 30 were Mark Andrews, and then today it was George Kittle. All right, moving on to DFS here on the Fantasy Roundup as we get you set for Week 14. Again, you can leave us a question in the comments about your lineup, about DFS, about anything else, fantasy basketball. Happy to answer those. Spencer, I'm a little surprised here. A Panthers stack.
Yeah, I felt like it might be worth it because of the new OC over there. They parted ways with Joe Brady, and it is kind of risky, I'll admit, because it could end up a flop. But I do think it's one of those, if you're trying to swing and get some values here, it's a great matchup against Atlanta. Cam Newton and DJ Moore. DJ Moore's actually been really consistent despite the quarterback turmoil over there. He's usually managed to produce no matter who the quarterback is. So, I mean, if you're not comfortable with Cam, if you'd rather a higher price quarterback, I get it. But like DJ Moore, I think could be really good this week. And Cam, though, with his rushing, I definitely think he'll bounce back. And Antonio Gibson with J.D. McKissick possibly out again, he's a good value. I feel like they're at 6,000. Kind of a tough matchup against the Cowboys, but he looks healthy. He's been getting a true workhorse amount of touches there for Washington. And then Foster Moreau, this is all dependent on Darren Waller's status. He didn't do much this week in place of Waller, but his price there is pretty low at 4,000. So if Waller would happen to be out injured, he could be a pretty good dart throw against the Chiefs this week.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the idea of Foster Moreau, former LSU guy, by the way, but he really has not been that productive when Waller's been out. Outside, I think he did have a touchdown 1 week. But the Chiefs, I mean, listen, the tight end's one place you can attack them. That defense has ended up being pretty good for the Chiefs. But they don't give up a lot deep, but maybe that means Derek Carr's going to work underneath and Foster Moreau could have that week. So we'll see. My DFS values, I did not go with a traditional stack this week because I think Dak Prescott's priced up a little bit too high, but I love the Cowboys spot in Washington. I think Dallas wants to try to get their offense rolling again. It's the highest scoring fantasy offense in the NFL this year. And quite frankly, like, the wide receiver picture specifically for Sunday's main DFS slate is pretty bleak because Davante Adams is out there, but he's priced way up. I'm sorry, he's Sunday night anyway, so he's not in the main slate, and he's priced way up. But you look at, like, okay, so you take him out of there, you take Justin Jefferson out of there because they're Thursday night, you take Cooper Kupp out of there because the Rams play Monday night, along with DeAndre Hopkins and Robert Woods. And any of those Rams guys. I mean, the main slate, all of a sudden, you don't have a ton of good wide receiver options. But I'm going to take a stab at Amari Cooper this week. We saw him. He had limited snaps last week against the Saints, but he looked pretty good when he was in there. And with another, kind of that mini bye from the Thursday night game to Sunday, he had COVID, and he apparently had it pretty bad. But if he's back to full health, I think he's a spot. And then Tony Pollard, like anybody who watched that Cowboys-Saints game, look, Tony Pollard's going to start taking more and more carries away from Zeke. Zeke is not right. He's not explosive. Tony Pollard is the guy you want in Dallas. And then the rest of my picks here, Taysom Hill, we talk again, he's got to play. So keep an eye on the injury report. But if he plays, boy, couldn't you just see Sean Payton saying, we've got to beat the Jets. We are just going to run it right down their throat, just like the Patriots did to the Bills last night, except with more quarterback runs. We're just going to run it and run it and run it and run it. And Taysom Hill could have another 100-yard rushing day. And listen, what you go for in DraftKings is you try to get the fantasy points that are equal to 1/3 of their value. So Taysom Hill's 5,600, so you're looking for 19-plus fantasy points. If you can do that at every position, you're going to make money. 19-plus fantasy points, if you've got 100 yards rushing, is not that difficult for a quarterback to get to. And I think Taysom Hill could get there against the Jets. And then Travis Kelce, look, I know he doesn't strike you as a value pick. He's the highest priced tight end. But the Raiders get scorched by tight ends. Kelsey's, I believe, okay, so I looked this up. The last 8 games, last 7 games, this is the 8th one. The last 7 games the Chiefs have played against the Raiders, Travis Kelce has gone for at least 7 catches and 100 yards in 6 of those 7 games. And he's gone for at least a touchdown in 5 of those 7 games. So you're telling me if you can pencil him in for, and I realize John Gruden's gone, but it's a lot of the same personnel. If you can pencil him in for 7+ catches, 100+ yards, and a touchdown, we're in business at 7,400. I don't care if it's high. I'm buying Travis Kelce this week.
Yeah, I feel you because I've noticed a lot of the tight ends that were usually good values, like Pat Freiermuth and stuff. They've creeped up in price a little bit. So I would say that, hey, yeah, if you really want to like get a money in the bank tight end, it might be good to just pay up for one of the elite options like a Kelce or Kittle.
Yeah, it feels like a week to pay up for tight ends. It kind of feels like a week to pay up for receivers too, although again, a lot of the top receivers are not in that main slate if you're playing the Sunday afternoon slate. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. You don't have Davante Adams. You don't have Cooper Kupp. You don't have Justin Jefferson. And it just, it kind of makes things difficult this week for those pass catchers. So I would pay up a tight end.
Oh, show.
All right, before we wrap up the show, let's talk Week 14 sleepers. And we went deep sleepers this week.
Right. Yeah, a couple of guys on the graveyard teams, but could have some fantasy value. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown because of the fact that he seems to be the guy there finally. It took him a little while to get acclimated, rookie receiver, but he's taken over there. He got a lot of targets. I think he caught 10 passes this week. Lions finally got a win. Might be getting a little something positive going over there, and they get Denver this week, another struggling team. Denver normally good on defense, but I think Amon-Ra's worth a dart throw considering he's a primary target over there, and he's just he's trending up. You got to go with guys at this point. You got to try to look at the trends, try and find people that are trending up, and I feel like he fits that bill.
Yeah, I think he is. I don't love the matchup this week with Denver, but if he's going to be a target hog up there in Detroit, hey, we'll take target hogs. My pick, Laviska Shenault for Jacksonville, he's been struggling. The whole passing offense has been struggling. Look, we call them sleepers for a reason. My initial thought here was Russell Wilson because I think Russell Wilson's going to have a huge finish to the season. I haven't talked about that yet. I think if you've got Wilson and you stashed him on your bench or you've been streaming, I'd start him because I think he finally looked right against the 49ers. He's going into a possible year where he wants to be traded or could possibly be in line for a bigger payday and extension down the road. He wants to show that he's healthy. The Seahawks don't have anything going on in the running game. They're going to throw a ton. I like, but anyway, long story short, I put Russell Wilson down and thought, well, he doesn't count as a sleeper, right? I mean, he was a top 5 quarterback this year. You can't use him as a sleeper. And so I went looking around, and Laviska Shenault hasn't been great, but the Titans have a problem against number 1 receivers. Their defense is not great. They're 8-4. They're in good playoff position. But let's not kid ourselves. This is not a great defense in Tennessee. And at some point, Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence is a talented kid. He's going to figure it out. And like you said, it's a dark throw, but I'm going to take my chances with Shenault.
For sure. Yeah, it's just, right now I hate to just say stay away from all Jags, but that's kind of how I'm feeling at this point just because they haven't really shown any progress. But they do, against Tennessee, that's a little better matchup. They had the Rams this past week. It's just, I guess if anybody could do it there, it'd be him since he's a little younger. Like Marvin Jones it's probably hard for a veteran like that to stay into it. When your team's that bad. But, Laviska, he's hungry. He's got a lot to prove, so I wouldn't feel too good about anything about that team. But I guess if you're in a deeper league and need a dart throw, and he'd be the Jag I would pick if I had to pick one.
And look, everything's relative. If you've got DJ Moore and Davante Adams and Terry McLaurin on your team, you're not starting Laviska Shenault. Let's not kid ourselves. He's sitting on your bench. But if you've got guys on bye weeks and you need to fill in and you got injuries, I wouldn't be afraid to put him in a flex situation. And then the other thing is DFS. Again, a lot of the top receivers are either on bye or they're playing on Thursday night or Sunday night or Monday night this week. And if you need somebody in that main slate, I don't mind him. I think he's priced down under $5,000. I didn't put him there, but as a value. But I think, again, it's a sleeper because people are sleeping on him.
Right. Yep.
That about does it for the fantasy roundup this week. Spencer, I do want to ask you your strategies for playoff fantasy football. How much do they change versus the regular season? Because again, in the regular season, I'm going to give that guy one more chance, or I don't like the matchup this week, but I got to play him because I don't want to drop him yet. I don't have the room on my bench. Like, it becomes a little more urgent here, where you're not guaranteed another week, and so you've really got to play for this week.
Right. Yeah, I don't tinker with it too much because honestly, I always remember a year where I benched Russell Wilson in a year where he was dominant because he was facing the Jags, who at the time had a great defense. I benched him in favor of Alex Smith, who had a good matchup, and it was actually having a pretty good year that year, but it ended up costing me the week. So it always reminds me, like, don't get too cute with it. If it's an obvious thing, like if your starters like having to play in a blizzard or something, then yeah, you might want to pull them out. But if it's not something like that, if it's a deal to where it's tough. I mean, you got to adjust a little bit, but don't go too far. Like if you have elite people, like if you have Tom Brady at home, like don't sit him. Like, and I mean, I don't care who he's facing. If he's in good weather, I'm playing an elite quarterback like that any day.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not saying you don't reinvent the wheel. Certainly, if you've got a good starting lineup, you stick with it, unless, like you said, maybe it's a Monday night situation where you were. I don't even know a good example from that game because you're still probably starting Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Maybe you don't start Dawson Knox in that. I don't know, but like, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, don't be afraid to. Oh, hey, the what's a good example? The Rams have a good defense, right? So I need to start the Rams because hold on now. They're playing the Cardinals this week. I don't know that you want to do that. There's probably a better streaming option out there. And if you need to win this week to get into the playoffs, you probably don't start the Rams this week, right?
Right. And it's all about the odds, I feel like, and then you got to be a little more picky about it. You got to just evaluate everything, look at the wire, look at your bench, and be like, well, who has the best odds to outscore so-and-so. If I feel like this, like if my bench player, if I look at his matchup and his trends, circumstances, what he's been doing lately, if he's trending up and I feel his odds of doing well this week are better than my every week flex, well then sorry, I know you're the guy that got me here, but if you're trending down and the other dude's trending up, I mean, I'm gonna make that switch. You can't be afraid to make some switches if the trends call for it. Just don't get too cute and bench a guy that's been really solid for you all year. And like you said earlier, Zach, it's all relative. So I mean, I'd have to see like everyone's roster to really say. But just on a general scale, that'd probably be my best advice. Like just follow the trends and just kind of go with your gut and look at what do you feel the odds are of someone outscoring another. And if you feel strongly about a bench player or the guy you have, well, go with that guy. Go with the one you feel strongly about. At the end of the day, you don't want to be kicking yourself and saying, I mean, we're here to give y'all advice, and I always hope people listen. But at the end of the day, it's your team. So if you really feel strongly about something, then go for it. Like, it's not like we're here to help, but it's not. Don't always feel. If you feel strongly about something, then don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah, the good news is, if you want to submit your question to the Guru this week, if you have a specific lineup question, we're about out of time. You can drop one in the comments. If we see it, we'll get to it. But you can also hit up Spencer at Spencer the Guru on Twitter or Instagram. He's real good about following up on those questions and talking about them. I mean, it's getting down to it, Spencer. The trade season's over. Free agent pickup's only going to get you so far this time of year, outside of some streamers. It's time to get down to brass tacks.
Exactly. Yeah, y'all can go hit me up on either of those platforms at Spencer the Guru, and shoot, we might be bringing the podcast back for the playoffs. Y'all stay tuned.
All right. All right, little teaser there. I like it. Well, hey, for our producer Patrick McGee and for Spencer the Guru Urquhart, this is the Fantasy Roundup brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook here on bet.nola.com. I'm Zach Ewing. We'll see you Thursday at 4 o'clock for At the Book.